What do you do when your community starts to fall apart, or what happens when somebody who started something no longer is at the helm of that project, and there's a desire for things to continue, but you're not really sure where to go? I know that's a bit of a wandering entrance, but what else am I going to be known for? Today's guest is Brent. Brent has been on before. You might know him as OneOneBravo. Brent is an instructor out of the Pacific Northwest. He's been on the show before to talk about a series of community events that were being hosted, some lessons learned, and something to come from the future. So, Brent, I can only do so good at introducing you. Would you wrap it up for me?
Hey, yeah. Like you said, my name is Brent. I own OneOneBravo LLC with a co-partner, 18 Zulu. We teach out of the Pacific Northwest on a private range. Just two military people. I've got 10 years in the service, and my business partner's got 26 years, and we still hold some DoD contracts teaching, and we do what we love out here.
So it's that contract life that keeps you running.
Yeah, it keeps the the roof, the mortgage. I bought a new car, so
there we go. You also have a distinct art style when it comes to your vehicles. So one of these days I've got to see the do you still have the Cowboy Bebop car?
Yeah, the red Camaro. No, we sold the red Camaro. I'm definitely in a constant, like, I'll build something now and then be like, okay, well, I've took it as far as I can. Let's, swap it out. But I do have another Camaro. I have a T-top that we painted Mopar purple, and, swap the engine, all stuff like that. And then my current project car, I have a 1995 R33 GTR, one owner from Japan that I've been taking to car shows. So if you're into the JDM lifestyle and you grew up like me watching Initial D, you wanted one of those cars that, to drive a right-hand drive car in America.
Nice. Well, we have our hobbies and we have our interests and we have the things that we're good at. So today we're going to stick with the gun culture side of things and how we oftentimes talk about community, but making it functions quite a bit different.
It is. I've had the luxury and privilege that I put on community classes while I was still in the service. And it was originally like a give back to get more people to train, right? Because you only have so much time while you're at work. And as we know, you don't get to shoot as much as you'd like to. So it started with just some service members, and then it turned into some service members and their friends. And then, then classes were almost 50-50. And then it turned into it was like almost 60 people, and it's me and a couple assistant instructors, and we're taking over like an entire rock quarry. Like, we're bringing more targetry than we would if we were teaching, a company of dudes at work. So, and it was interesting, right? Because you get people from all walks of life. You get the, lady that bought a gun just to defend herself, and you get the guy in full kit that, wanted to run around and do all that stuff. So it was a cool take on getting all those different people to interact and come together for the love of gun culture.
Yeah, we've seen these things before. In the earlier episode that you were on, you talked about how it came about and how, in a sense, some of this was very organic. You had you started with a smaller group of people that continued to grow over time, and you'd host events that eventually expanded into rather large groups, as you said a minute ago, 60 people. But then you were doing some more thematic training, like vehicle-based movements, or something a little bit more competition focused, or something with a series of different firearms that people haven't even had the chance to shoot before. And to those of you who've listened in the past, you might see some of those inspirations reflected in the public land cleanups that I've been putting on, or that Redacted, and we did one with Flux, and we did one in Phoenix with Desert Warship, and we're going to keep going on for the rest of the year. Because I definitely took some notes from that, and I hope you don't think that is stealing. Now, I'm very excited to announce the first official sponsor of the Redacted Culture Cast. Obsidian Arms is one of those companies that reflects the many facets of gun culture. Not only are their firearms frequently found on competition fields like USPSA and 3Gun, but they are a Minnesota-based, US-sourced original equipment manufacturer. Obsidian Arms makes their own punch and tool kits for the amateur and professional gunsmith out of Little Canada, Minnesota, that come with a lifetime warranty. Whether it is fine parts that require a Swiss machine, or you're in the design phase and are looking for an American machine shop that is in tune with the needs of gun culture, go check out Obsidian Arms at obsidianarms.com. Thank you, and now back to the show.
What is it? Imitation is the biggest form of flattery. You know, like it. And I want every community, if you have the ability to shoot on public land, like bring people out, right? Like I get when it's private land, people get a little wishy-washy due to suing and stuff like that, but it's awesome where you lived. And I saw that you partnered up with Ben and those guys from Flux, and like to me that's awesome. Up here the only thing we try to add is we get with DNR ahead of time, so that they know we're doing a cleanup, so it's kind of government sponsored, and they actually come out and give us volunteer hour tickets and stuff like that. Yeah,
volunteer hour tickets. We've been working with the Forest Service.
Yeah, so I don't know how it works in your state, but in our state, if you volunteer, and it is for a state entity, they have to fill out a volunteer slip for you to prove that you did XYZ.
Does it come out of my taxes?
I don't know how that works, but I know we put over like 1,000 hours the 1 year collectively of all of us just going out to the local shooting sites and cleaning them up, right? Like.
Well, that's good. That's good. Well, let's get into it. When was the last time you were running these courses? And part of the inception of this episode was that you had made a comment that you'd been asked to do more, but you don't think you're going to, but it's something warranting a longer form conversation on the subject.
Yeah, so I quit doing community classes, I would say. I think I brought one back like 6-7 months ago, just to see what would happen. And it was good. It was exactly how it used to be, which was kind of cool to just pick right back up, because I thought I was leaving the Pacific Northwest at one point. But I put it on the back burner again because we kind of expected somebody else to pick it up and run with it. There was a group of people that had helped me in the beginning, and they kind of wanted to start their own thing. And that's cool, right? Like, why not have more classes that are free for the community, right? Are they putting out the same kind of content or subpar or that? It doesn't really matter, right? They're putting on free classes. Anytime you get more people out shooting, it's better, right? And they fell apart. Who knows? I never dived into it. I never even asked them, but I'm like, hey, look, kudos to you. My hat's off that you tried to put it on. And now you see doing that for 5 years, how hard it was, how much logistic goes into it, how much getting things set up. Also writing curriculum, right? This isn't just me going out and being like, oh, we should do these like 5 drills that I saw on the internet, right? Like, this comes from my background being an instructor in the military and going, how can I get these new people who have zero skill or people with higher skill from point A to point B, and everybody's still on the same page, but everyone's still happy.
Yeah.
And there's a lot
of work that goes into it.
Yes. And it's been asked so many times to bring back, and I'm like, why should it come back, right? Because if the community wanted that to continue, somebody would have picked it up, right? Or tried. And, is the community there like it should be, right? Like, will this be beneficial to the community, or will it not? Will people always want it to be what it used to be? Will it ever be what it used to be?
Are you asking somebody within your arena to answer the question, or is it a bit more rhetorical?
I think it's maybe both. And I've talked to the people who've helped me since day one, and that kudos to Chris. He's never asked for anything. He's like, look, I just want a better community. And he's like, I see that you were doing it, so I volunteer. And then I've had, this guy that owns a real estate business that's like, hey, anytime you put on community classes, just tell me. I will pay for all the food, right? Like there's people who volunteer their time and or money to throw at these because they want more people trained. But I guess I saw that the people who would come to these free community classes would never take classes outside of that. And I guess that started to get under my skin a little bit. Like, it's the same people who would show up with really nice gear, brand new guns every month and new pistols. And their comments at the end would always be like, well, I want to go over this or that. And I'm like, yeah, take a class either from me or somebody else, but you have to spend your money on your training if you want to get better. These community classes are free, but I can only cover a certain amount of topics for this range of people. But they were unwilling to spend their money on training after the fact, but would be the first person to, if insert tactical, company makes a new mount that's bronze, they'd be the first person to like get on that drop list and buy it. But I'm like, you won't spend a couple $100 on your own training?
Now, that raises a kind of a question, which is, I can understand why somebody like that would be, you be able to identify it. It seems like, hey, you might, if you were in charge of this person and you had some authority over them, like a team leader or squad leader, or almost even like a parent, you might say, hey, you need your priorities are wrong. You're spending a lot of money on something that you're buying all these things, and I know you're spending this money, but you're not. Why aren't you doing it on something else? Why aren't you spending some of that on taking the courses? Now that's one side. The other side is I completely understand why you can't do a ballistic breaching class, a impromptu free ballistic breaching class for people when your community group, the people that are in it range from no experience to a large amount, because you can't just take somebody off the street and be like, okay, here's a shorty 870, go blow that door. I mean,
it's funny you say that. I'll send you pictures afterwards of the shotgun class. The shotgun class was, not to break off and caveat, but it was into 5 parts. One, we had a competition lady come down and teach people how to quad load and dual load, and like we had a belt that people would put on to learn. So that was the competition side.
Yep.
They had a plate rack and a spinner. My business partner, who is an 18 Zulu, we built a door, with the 2x4 that you could put behind it and teach them how to do just the figure 8 breach. And we'd give them slugs. And then, we had a skeet side, and then we had my side, which was basically, you go from buck to slug, how to do a slug override and stuff like that. So, yeah, it is funny you brought that up. I'm like, we did kind of try to teach people, hey, if you have a shotgun and you have to breach a door, this is what you would do.
Yeah. What shotgun did you use? Do you remember?
So we have a couple different shorties, 870s, 590s, 500s. I have a Japanese imported Smith & Wesson 3000 that I'm very proud of.
The variety is insane. Yeah.
Well, because we want people to learn on different items and stuff. So, we wanted to make sure we had pump action, semi-automatic, magazine fed, just to open people's horizon. And what's cool is they showed up with whatever they had. So we had kids with weird old hunting shotguns that I'd never seen before that were probably in a Sears and Roebuck, catalog.
Yep. So going back to this statement here, though, I asked kind of a bit of a rhetorical one, or a question whether or not it was a rhetorical question, which is on the one hand, I can understand why somebody shows up with a certain level of equipment, and then they're saying, hey, well, could you do a course on, pick a subject that's too, that you need to have everybody at a certain level, and let's just use a CQB thing, right? You can't just go from standing and shooting and hitting a target to moving in a 3-dimensional environment with people on multiple sides.
Can you say that again for the people who are probably not listening? Because they always want to skip to that.
Well, no, I mean, it's not that it's impossible. It's not that getting there is impossible. It's that I mean, and the inverse of this, there's an inverse argument to that is true, but you can't just go from a flat range to shooting in a CQB environment, because it's just not a flat range, but like just standing and shooting a sheet of paper.
Yes.
You can't. There's so much more to it, and yet you see all this stuff get lost in translation.
Yes, the understanding of knowledge and passing it on, and like the student is looking at you and you're trying to tell him, hey, it's okay, you don't have that ability yet. But then they're always upset that it's like, well, what do you mean I could do it? It's like, look, you don't understand yet, and that's okay.
Yeah. So we can talk about it in a couple different ways, but one of them, and this is that inverse argument, is that we also take 19-year-olds and give them M16s and try to teach them how to CQB, right? So I can understand where, from a student's perspective, there's this frustration as to why is this stuff not being taught more? Or why can't you do it? And the basic thing that I can come up with is it's insanely expensive and insanely complicated to actually facilitate teaching something like this that doesn't look gimmicky or cartoony. And
Yeah, you're correct. I would say the biggest thing about those kids is, like, again, they're coming to you for knowledge and you're trying to teach them that. But when you're trying to, like, we go back into what you said about like almost parenting, I'm like, hey, look, you spend your money how you want to spend it, but you're coming to me to teach you something. So I'm going to try to teach you something, and you don't need all that yet. And I think that's the biggest gap in the community, that people who have served and people who haven't always get into this argument where, we're like, hey, you know what? You don't need 5 ARs. You don't need 6, 7 pistols. Like, you need to get good with that one that you have. And we say that from experience, because what were we? We were service members with one rifle, right? Maybe you're a machine gun or whatever, but the concept of, like, you had to get good with what you had. So this is a lesson that we learned the hard way, and we're trying to impart that free of charge. And they just maybe they're tangible creatures now, right? Like, maybe they just want to say I have XYZ. But those type of people were coming to the community classes more than I would like. And I normally it's a free, but you had to sign up, and I took the first 60 names. And that's what I would go with. And it turned into slowly, like, the mom and pops that, wanted to come out and shoot, didn't get to sign up. And it was always the same, like, tactical kids. And it got to the point where I'm like, hey guys, like, are you going to invest your money into more training, or is this all you want out of the gun community? Because that's true too. If they just want to come and hang out with their friends and shoot, like it's almost like a golf thing, is that what they want? And if that's what they wanted, that's fine. That is not my intent on the community classes. And maybe that's why I slowly petered them off, is because the majority of the people coming were not people in the gun community that I saw that I wanted to be a good representation of the gun community, if that makes sense. They were
so
very
you're
self-centered people who were all about what they could buy and what they could wear, and it was like a fashion show. And, like, I'm not trying to judge them while they're there. I'm like, hey, this is the drill, this is what we're doing, like, we're here to train. But that's all they really cared about. Like, they could be completely dog shit at whatever the drill was, but they were just like, at the end, they would just sit around and talk about their guns and gear constantly.
I can understand. I understand the idea, the issue, if people are taking up slots on a community funded or community provided training day, that there's a limited number of people that can attend, and they're taking up slots, they're taking up that billet, but are not participating in the event.
They're
That is
participating in the event physically, not mentally.
has is that a let's do like a subject change here. Then is that something that needs to be taught?
Maybe them paying attention, maybe them giving a fuck, right? So like in the military, right, we use a couple different things. Like one, it's your job. Two, we might switch to shame. You know,
Sure.
how do we get someone to comply? And when it's a community class and it's free, you know, I'm not trying to yell at people. You know, we're
No,
all
yelling isn't going to be
adults.
productive in this environment either.
But you know, I would kind of shame them sometimes and be like, "Damn, dude, you shot like that. I don't even know if you should be wearing cry pants right now." Right? Trying to do something to get them to want to perform. Right? And I,
Mhm.
you know, again, I have a sports psychologist that has worked with us for about 10 years, Brent from Elite Mentality. Look him up. And I've asked him, and I'm like, "Hey, give me tons of ideas to try to get these people to want to perform when they come here, and not just make it about who has the coolest kit or rifle, or you know, who has the best clone build." And that's what I mean, is that's what the community in my area was turning into, and I didn't want to be a part of that.
So it was going off in a different genre, a different direction than you were initially envisioned it.
And if that's what the community wants, that's fine, right? That's at that point where it's like, look, you know, I'm the odd man out. I'll bow out, but then I'm the one putting it all on. So I was like, cool, it's someone else's turn. And I even told them, I was like, you can come to my range. I will load up your truck with all my targetry and you can take it off to the woods. Just bring it back. Like, I will still donate all of my items for you guys to shoot, because I still want the community to shoot, but, you know, bring my stuff back. Never got hit up once.
Yeah,
And
because
then you know,
organization of such things is difficult. You need to
yeah,
put in time and
you
effort and
know,
energy.
follow these people, and I'm like, hey, you know, are you going to do anything on your own? They're like, oh no. They're like, but when are you putting on a class? And it just, it, I don't know if it's just people don't want, they just want to show up and do what they want to do.
Yeah,
Want
it's
someone
weird.
else to organize all of it.
Yeah, no, it's easier. Well, there's a when you're going to an event and then you're putting on an event are are, are very different things, and there is a quite a bit of work that goes on behind the scenes. I think, to put it even gently, you could imagine an example that would be, well, I don't know. If you remember maybe about 5, 6, 7 years ago, the kind of like Sigma grind set thing was pretty popular.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want. I know I'm kind of straying across genres, but what I meant is that, like, you saw this kind of burst, this kind of bubble pop of, right, but well, they hadn't popped, but this bubble grow that eventually popped. That was this sort of like hustle culture. I don't do any of these things. I just work all the time mentality. And I gotta, like, I don't. Sometimes I don't buy it, but and I know that sometimes, well, very oftentimes it turned out that it wasn't as true as people were making it out to be. It just became a series of virtue signaling on how ascetic you are, and how, like, I don't drink, I don't do anything fun, I just work all the time on my day trading algorithm. And you're like, good for you, bud.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I think that was a derivative of pop culture and the music at the time, due to
sure.
certain artists that, you know, are like, this is all I do. This is why I'm famous. This is why, you know, my you know, album went multi-platinum. You know, I sit in the studio, I live in the studio, and like, I could see that it was a direct derivative from that, and people would try to
Yeah.
apply it to their everyday lives.
Yeah, and I'm sure it has nothing to do with all the shady backroom deals that went on. But, you know, I'm sure it had nothing to do with all the things that get you banned on YouTube. Just
Yeah.
kidding. My point on that one is, so, like, but to kind of follow up with that, the just putting on an event does take quite a bit of work. You have to pick the date, you have to pick the time, you have to schedule all the there's I mean, and those are simple things, but, even the cleanups that we put up are not really that intensive on the front end for myself. Date, time, location. That's if I can start with those three, everything else can kind of fall into place. And then you put people, or you help, or people oftentimes volunteer to take on certain elements, but it's, but there's still time. Like there's still time. The first one, you have to make the flyers and the advertisements and distribute them, and you got to get all this kind of, and you have to take on the responsibility of what's going on that day, and you have to make sure the lawn is mowed and the trees are trimmed on a different day because you can't do it on that Saturday, and all this other kind of stuff. It all adds up.
Yeah, and the biggest thing that people don't realize is like even the targetry we take and everything gets destroyed.
Yes,
Right.
and so it
There's
needs to be
always some
replaced.
idiot bringing fucking M855 or M855 Alpha 1, and like 2 rounds in, you're like, what the fuck? Right. Like,
Mhm.
what? Like, we've told you like 76 times, like, no green tip, no fucking steel tip. Like, we want these targets to last so that I'm not funding my own money replacing shit that like I shouldn't have to be replacing.
It's exhausting, but I think at that point in time, it's also, that is the cost of doing business in some sense.
Yes, and but it would get to, I'd have certain people do certain things, and then there's Pacific Northwest. There's tons of photographers and videographers out here, and I'd say, hey, you guys can come take all the pictures and videos. Just make sure you ask all the students, in case they don't want their picture taken, because a lot of them work with businesses that are not 2A friendly, and they're not allowed to post that stuff. And those photographers and videographers, for the most part, by and large, were pretty good at what they were doing. But then they would just like, then they would bring somebody and they'd, be like, hey, can they jump in and shoot this? And I'm like, hey, man, like, next time, just tell me ahead of time. Don't just show up with 3 people in your fucking truck and be like, hey,
No.
can they jump in? Right. Like, this isn't all of us like shooting at trash in the woods, right? Like
Yeah.
everything is organized. Every round is accounted for.
Mhm.
I have all the drills written down for each student, how many rounds they're going to need. Like, and it's just, people don't understand that aspect of doing that, or being an instructor and having everything like, hey, we need to get to this point by this time so that we can get to this at the very end of the day. Right.
Yeah, which kind of leads to my second question, which unfortunately we're going to have to backtrack a few minutes to get to it. And that is that you were mentioning how you had started these events, and then over time you saw, I'm going to put some words in your mouth and correct me if I'm
No, you're
missing the
good.
point. But you saw the direction of the community moving in a way that you were not interested in participating anymore. And some of that was perhaps a little bit more trivial when it came to training versus performing,
Very correct.
or and you wanted something, you became hungry, or you were more interested in something that was a little bit more serious, and you didn't see that your best efforts were being put to use in that environment, so you started kind of drifting away.
Yeah. Like if you want to show up with a, M16 from fucking Vietnam because you're bored and you want to put cat ears on your Peltors, like that's up to you, right? Like that's fine. If this isn't serious to you, that's okay, right? If you're there to have fun, that's fine. But don't take it away from the people that are there who, they're there to train. You
Hmm.
know, we have the lady who bought her first rifle and lives on a ranch by herself because her husband died. And she's like, I want to be able to defend, my property with this rifle that I've never shot before. And I'm like, cool. Like, here you go. Come to this class, right?
Yes.
And a bunch of retards dicking around the whole time take away from her learning because, the first drill might be easy for them, but not her, right? Because she's still very new to this stuff.
Yes.
But
Yes.
you used it 100% correctly. Like it was going in a direction where certain members would start to turn it into, like, I would use the term elitism,
Mm.
because they'd be good at the first few drills, right? And I'm like, that's cool, but like then when we get into later on stuff, you fall apart. Like,
Sure.
why aren't you training? Like,
So you could see but so you witnessed the limit of their training, and what, and yeah. So the point of this question is actually, it's not to tip it on its head, but it's also to kind of look at how we do group formation, because and on the one hand, you're in charge, so you get to curate who gets to be there in a sense. Um, and I wonder how much of the we're going to talk about the greater gun culture or people. We could even try to just tip this into a little bit of casual psychology of group formation and selection. In that, one frustration that has been expressed about gun culture by myself and I believe others is that there's a whole lot of people who want to have a community, but not a lot of people who are willing to start one.
Yes,
You
or
want to have
participate in it.
Yes, but and the reality is that I think as I'm getting older, I'm realizing that more and more that that's just the reality of mankind.
You are correct, and I tried very hard, and was like, all right, hey, don't make this about me, right? Like, obviously, that's the hardest part, which people don't talk about, right? Like, because it's your show. If it fails, it's you. If somebody gets hurt, it's you. But then when it does well, you want to make sure you push the credit to everyone who helped,
Mhm.
all the people who showed up.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, if it fails or somebody gets hurt, it's just you. People are just going to remember, oh, that guy got shot at this guy's class, right?
From a business standpoint, not maybe that's not even the right word, but from one standpoint, it seems a little asymmetrical.
Yeah.
You bear all the responsibility for everything that goes wrong, but you take none of the credit for everything that goes well.
And that starts to get at you for a long time, right? Like, and when other people try to emulate it, you're like, okay, I want you to succeed. Is there anything I can do to help you? And they're like, no, I got this. This is going to be easy. And then, a couple months later, you never see them ever do it ever again. I'm like, oh, weird. Huh.
Yeah, it's not easy though. You know it's not. So you kind of have to sometimes you have to let people fail.
But like you said, with the community, it's like, you foster and harbor what you deem acceptable. And when people are always like, oh, you shouldn't call people out in the community, we should be coming together, I'm like, no, that's the community trying to police itself because it doesn't enjoy that behavior in that realm or kingdom. Just like with animals, if there's unacceptable behavior, the collective goes after that individual to stop that behavior so it doesn't continue and or foster.
The there's a good book to read called Why Honor Matters by Sommers, Sommers, and he talks about how there's elements of an honor culture that that in many ways is what I see people desiring when it comes to community.
Well,
We've
we
had
can't have that when there's no shame now. Kids don't feel shame. And when I say kids, I'm talking about like my age and below. Like they
yeah,
don't feel
25-year
shame.
old. Well, they
Yeah,
don't.
they're
Mm,
they're. I mean, we both, not to throw military stuff in there. They get so excited to get out of the army and get 100% VA when they didn't do anything, and they tell
sure.
people about it. And I'm like, you don't have any shame, you know?
That okay?
I,
Are you
I
talking?
believe no, because with the honor thing, right? Like, if we want a community which is, they have morals, they have ethics, all that, it starts from the ground up. But like when we have kids coming in that like they have no shame. If you're like, hey man, why are
Ah,
you like so bad at this? Like, I'll help you, and they're like, oh well, I did my best. I had a student say that was the same age as me. And I was like, hey, man, at the end of every drill, I'm like, hey, what do you think you could work on? And he's like, nothing. And I was like, but you missed half your shots. And he's like, well, I did my best. And that blew my mind because I had never heard an individual say that out loud. Like, you have nothing to work on and you did your best.
and it's not a perfect score.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I'm just
you're not.
like, like, I did not think those people existed, I guess.
Sure. So my point is this one, and my point in on this one, I think is I'm going to go back to honor culture and Sommers with honor versus dignity because both of them will have different forms of ethics. But a feature of an honor culture or not an honor society like in school, but a culture that uses honor as part of its self-regulating measure is that there has to be some concept of shame, and that there is that the acceptance of the group means something. So it's not really about morals in the sense of an honor culture is a moral culture. In fact, many honor cultures are historically known for their lack of morality. If you can think of things like motorcycle gangs in the 1960s, or I mean, actually, in a lot of interstate, like a lot of like very, very, very cartel related monstrosities or atrocities against mankind. These are all there's a certain honor culture element to that, which is different than a dignity culture, but we're kind of getting specific on terms here. The way that that plays out in the gun culture, though, seems to be that in the element that you're describing, not everyone knew what they were about or what they wanted it to be. There, and this is not inconsistent with some frustration that's expressed at the greater gun culture. Anytime there's some sort of controversy, there's an entire cacophony of fools who go about making it their identity to make fun of people. And it's just like great. Now, the question that I would ask, though, is why are those people not like, or why would any of us in a right mind give those people any semblance of credibility? If I'm putting together my A team of superheroes to go fight the Russian super Nazi threat, whatever it is, pick your your fictional problem, or if I've got to put together a team to go do something, and I'm not at least entirely bound by necessity, such as my environment, like the city's on fire or whatever. There are people that I am just not going to invite because I know that they don't have it. They don't have the ability. They are too focused on the nitpicky, complaining, jeering laughter at other people's failure. But the thing about it is they're a net zero. If you do not pass the selection course, I don't think you're a bad person. You're just not on the team. This isn't for you. And so what we get frustrated by are people who believe that they have a seat at that table, but have never paid their dues. They do not have the ability to meet the standard, and they're not going to even give it a shot. In fact, their only challenge to the standard is that they don't think it's legitimate.
So
If you don't,
it's great. You said it perfectly. The standard
Mhm.
or have done something. And I think that's the biggest thing in the gun culture that rifts people is the paying of dues. You said it perfectly. We have earned the right to say XYZ. And the problem is we've created a culture, not just in gun culture, but in the world, right? Like when a gorilla was shot at the zoo, how many people became fucking gorilla experts overnight online, right?
Sure.
The problem we used to have is like for you to have experience or a say in some matter, you used to do a decade in that area, right? If you somebody asked you a plumbing question, you're like, oh, I'm not a plumber, right? Like, well, this guy has 10 years of being a plumber. You should ask him. People forget that you used to have to put in years in a subject to be educated enough to even have a conversation on it. And now we've gone into this. Well, everybody has an opinion. Yes, everyone has an opinion, but those opinions have no weight.
Yeah. So another example of this, I think, in academia is it's a very classic one that I think we've seen play out multiple times, and that is the attitude of stumping. And what and oh, I stumped the professor, and you can see it from all different many different angles, but most we'll use the generic example of, you've got a kid with one degree, one semester, one semester of one class in a subject. Okay, you have one semester of one class in a subject. What makes you think that you can have any what part makes you think that you're going to challenge somebody who's got 20 years and a PhD in the subject? There's a danger there, because you said earlier we're doing elitism. You said that there were people within your community that were doing an elitism. They were becoming a little bit, I don't know, isolated or self-aggrandizing. I don't know how you want to describe it, but um, this is again another issue that America is dealing with the problem of experts. Look back to COVID. All of the experts were either in on the game or just wrong, and it was so oddly easy to tell. Now, how does something a microcosm of gun culture handle like this? Because are we going to do credentialism? Are we
And
going?
to be honest, I think we should, right? So if you go take a class, right, you're a very experienced shooter, you have a wealth of knowledge, you have done stuff in the service and outside of the service. I bet you when you go take a class, you look at who's teaching the class and what his pedigree is.
Yeah, it comes into consideration.
Because that is going to let you know a little bit about that person. Is it the end all be all? No. But he's going to not only come from some kind of experience, but it also means he was held to a standard to learn said experience.
This is where I might be coming off the rails a little bit here. It's either one of two things, but typically when I'm interested in who the individual is and I'm taking their course, or if I'm going to take someone's course, I'm interested in their background for context on what they might be talking about.
Yes.
I'm trying to it's not oftentimes a hierarchy thing. Like, for example, if some guy his claim to legitimacy is 2 years in the National Guard. Yeah, that might be a little it might be a little bit like, okay, man. It
Yeah,
doesn't
and
mean that I
I'm not saying that there's somebody with a zero background can train somebody, but it has become the thing now where that's some people's podium to stand on. And it's like,
okay.
but you could go out and earn something and then
Mhm.
have something to stand on. And that's, I think, the big thing in the gun culture is, it's always the haves and the have nots, right? Like, we shouldn't be measuring what fucking tab or fucking badge we have, but it's like, hey, were you an instructor in this category, right?
Sure.
Could you teach me something on it? Yes, but were you actually an instructor that taught it for years at a time and had a curriculum? And that's where I think we've gone away from this. I know
I
there's a guy that does a pretty good pie chart. He's a SEAL, and he like shows the pie chart, and there's this little tiny sliver, and he's like, "This is how much we actually shoot. This is our diving. This is our jumping. This is our vehicle stuff. Like, right? This is everything we have to do as a fucking Triton holder." And that is the thing that I think is getting into this culture thing where it's like you said, the kid going to the professor and he has a month of training. Well, this one kid who shot a bill drill all month goes up against a Green Beret and beats him in a bill drill, and now he thinks he can shoot.
Well, and that is part of the answer is you can shoot a bill drill. You can.
Yes.
Congratulations. Like, good for you. You can shoot a bill drill. I don't have a problem with that.
And that's where they believe now that their education stops, and it just turns into, well, they hold on to like, well, I beat that guy in that shooting, and he was a Green Beret. Ooh.
Cool. Like, you zeroed yourself out of selection. That's probably the only thing I can say is like
But that's
you
what this culture turned into was, I'd
uh
have active duty military with fancy hats come, and they're not competition shooters. So at the end of the day, when I set up a competition to shoot, they're not getting the best fucking times, right?
sure.
And the kid who's like, new at this and a decent competition shooter, well, of course you're going to beat that guy. That guy doesn't shoot competition style shooting.
Yeah.
And then that would be what they hold on to. You know what I'm
Sure.
saying?
Yeah. A distinct lack of maturity. It
And that
happens.
goes in. I like your analogy of the kid who takes 2 months of the semester and tries to challenge a guy who has 20 years into it. Same concept.
Yeah, we've seen this happen multiple times. There are it's a okay, we have to zoom out though. We have to be able to hold on to this conversation. So this is a hard one to grasp in its entirety because it what we're really having a conversation now on is what is it that legitimizes a community? Because we're going to go back to the experts issue. if you go, I think the gun culture specifically has been swung on a pendulum away from, so far away from, not necessarily credentialism, but legitimizing through background.
Oh
It's
yeah, it's
but
become a comical form of just entertainment now.
yes, the
Even look at
point.
YouTube. The YouTube shooters 7, 8 years ago, they wanted
Mhm.
to put out stuff that was like, hey, this is a legitimate item, or this is like what you should do. And now it's just comical because they just want views. And then it's like what you said earlier, like when they try to go back to a serious subject, everyone calls them out and they're like, well, why? I'm like, you can't pick and choose constantly if you want to be serious or not.
Hmm.
You can have comedic stuff, but if you are putting out 90% of your content and it's just comical, when you try to put out a 10% that might be informational, but you're not the SME on it, people are going to call you out for it. And you're
Uh,
getting mad, but it's like, that's not your background, dude.
okay, so I'm gonna pull back to the background question. There certainly was a time where if you had credentials, you're you were sort of given the floor. Let's call it
Oh
that,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
You
The
know,
over pronounce of freedom, yeah,
the
because it's like, yeah. So basically, I remember the day where like if you showed up and hey, this guy's a Navy SEAL, and people don't know what a Navy SEAL was, they would just give him the utmost amount of freedom because
ah
they're not going to challenge him because they have an ideal of what a Navy SEAL is. Not to
mhm.
pick on SEALs in case
Yeah, no,
one
but
SEAL
yeah, you're dealing with a credentialism thing, right? This not a credentialism. You're dealing with the kind of the experts problem of like what do we get? What do we inherently get from that? Stolen valor. This guy was never in the cool guy unit. He was attached to them once for one mission, but now he gets to say, I worked with the. And so now you have this, and then he'll take that and he'll run with it as far as he can go to make as much money off of it as he can. And what we find probably more offensive is how much of his identity is wrapped up in being a thing that he's not.
I
So
mean, we saw that happen to, their good buddies over at Flux.
Travis Raids, yep, that was a big event.
Um,
I was actually not. I was kind of taking a break from the gun culture when that happened. I think I just got back in when that all went down. So it's like a story that I only know in retrospect.
it little caveat. One of my friends, who was a GB that went on the podcast with him, afterwards called me and was like, some of his story didn't match up. And
Yeah.
I was like, ask him to see his cert, dude. Like there's a whole wall of certs behind. Ask somebody to see a cert. It's not rude anymore.
Yeah, no, it's not rude and it's not impossible. Like it's pretty well, it's pretty easy to do. I mean, and a lot of that stuff is pretty easy to pull up. I mean,
We have 20
I
some odd years of GWAT. Like,
the
it's
the
easy to.
issue with yeah, and we're not going to talk too much about stolen valor because it's really a simple thing. It's too easy. It's you can't get away with it. The community, there's too many people who know too many things. We live in an information economy. Like it's not hard to figure out if you're lying about certain things, and there's usually people there who can go on it. That doesn't mean that there aren't people whose entire personality is saying everything is a hoax. Like buddy, something has to be real every once in a while. But my point being said there is we're the gun culture has been at this pendulum, which is your background doesn't matter. No one cares about who you are. True. It still means something. It still it still means something in a sense that it helps build context, but it's not the same thing as making an argument from authority. Like I've been in a conversation with somebody before where it was exactly that. It was like, I don't know how to say this in any other way, but you have a really great theory. It sounds great in paper. Your argument is really good, but I was there. I did the thing. I do not care.
Yeah.
Like I was literally there. I did the thing. I watched it happen. I performed the thing that you're writing theory about. You're going to win in an argument on paper in this environment, but at the end of the day, I was there, I did it, you were not, you didn't, so stop talking.
Do you think we've cultivated an entire culture of people who, we're online 24/7, people research things 24/7, so they believe they have the knowledge but have never put it into practical application?
I'm
So
going to be
they
I'll be a little bit more gracious on the subject. I think that with the proliferation of information through the internet and through the ability for so many people to have so much access to so much at one time, let's not forget my father's generation, a Mini 14 was pretty crazy. You know what I mean? Like having an AR-15 was not nearly as common. Not to mention, you and I are both pretty deeply invested in this community, but now you've got people buying night vision plates, thermals, flashbangs. You know what I mean? Like the amount.
it is kind of comical where I'm like, all right, hey man, we're going to teach you how to focus your nods to infinity. They're like, what? And I'm like,
Yeah,
you spent 12 grand on these and you don't know how to focus your fucking night vision goggles?
I
Like,
have no, yeah, that's fine. But like my point in saying that is, if you remember 10 years ago, maybe it was 10 years ago. Yeah, 10 years ago, the status quo amongst instructors in every course that I had taken anywhere at any given time on a civilian side was there was in every single one of them this awkward pause where the instructor would have to explain to the students that there are certain things he cannot teach because he'll get sued for teaching people to quote assault the objective. And now you've got civilian CQB classes with Orion Training Group. Like,
yeah, I
so
know. I've taught an ambush class with a vehicle, so like, I get
you see
it.
my point though, but like the status quo has shifted. And what we're dealing with now, and what I think is what we're trying to say here, is that there is a crisis of what makes a thing legitimate. Because you
Yeah.
can fake it until you make it, until someone finds out you're a liar. You can get really good at a single popular drill and completely beat the brakes off of some supposedly world-renowned guy. You could see someone like Nicholas Irving go on a show and not hit a target that you would expect he'd be able to hit, and it's like, and that does that discredit his entire reputation? No. But now you have, so that but that you have all of these events, these things piling up on the table of, well, what makes a thing legitimate? Why is T-Rex Arms legitimate, or Lucas Botkin, or John Lovell, or Garand Thumb, or like, it's like I heard a guy literally yesterday talking about how somebody on the internet who is somebody that you and I have both known and know he is who he is, and he is legitimate in what he does, because we have that small circle talking about this guy about, oh, he's just an internet guy, he doesn't know anything about what he's doing, he's just doing it for the clicks and the views. And it's like, that's not true.
I
But
think it's the biggest thing we've learned with me and my business partner is your background does matter, but it also matters what you can currently still do, right? No
yes,
longer, and I think this comes to your honor system you talked about, right? Like the people in the know will always say, hey, he used to do XYZ, let's hear him out. But then also your ability to perform. I don't think that ever diminishes if
no,
you're in the sense of you're a trainer. If you're a trainer, I expect you to be able to do XYZ, right? Same from the
yes,
martial arts world. Your background, I think, matters in context of where did you learn it? Where did it come from? It's not something you just like pulled off the internet and, you've actually been tested in it, right? Like Ruben's big thing, pressure tested, right?
yes,
Like I don't care unless it's pressure tested. Like, have you ever gone, into the ring? Have you done force on force, right? Like your validity doesn't matter if all you've ever done is sat on a flat range and shot at a paper target, right? If the context of what we're trying to teach is not shooting on a flat range, shooting a paper target.
yes, okay.
And when we got into the community, to caveat back to the beginning of this, is we wanted to get away from shooting on a flat range at a paper target and show these people there is more to this than what meets the eye. There's going to be topics we're going to cover because I don't know what the world's going to turn into, right? I'm not a prepper, I'm not this doomsday guy, but when I do a class on foreign weapons, because I want you to be able to understand that every weapon has a few different principles, right? You know, there's a magazine, there's chambering, there's an action, there's a safety. I don't know what you're going to encounter in life, and I want your brain to still keep processing information and keep wanting to learn and not just stick with whatever the last topic we covered was.
Oh, for goodness sake, I'd take a foreign weapons course just to have fun with it.
Yeah.
You know what I
But
mean? Just to see how all these different things perform and how they're used, even if it's very unlikely. I mean, my life might be slightly different than some, but it's very unlikely that I'm going to encounter certain firearms in a life and death situation. But that doesn't mean.
so even domestically, right? Like you own a flux. Have you ever taken a flux to somebody who's never shot one and told them to play with it?
Yeah.
They're like, so the last drill we just did with a group of students, there was 10 students. So I like to do this drill at the end, right? I like to do fun stuff. I put 12 different pistols, you know, all unloaded on the table, and 12 of the mags. And they break into 2 teams of 5, and they have to run up, lock the slide to the rear, grab the corresponding mag, run over to the side, load the mag, fire at the steel target, set the pistol down, run back, right? A relay race. And you would be shocked how many people can't pick up a mag or like even look at it and be like, man, maybe this mag fits this. Yes, there was guns that we threw in there that people probably never seen in their life, right? I have an old Steyr pistol from like the 80s, right? Like I don't expect people to know what the fuck that thing is, but how many people were just shoving Glock 15 round mags, you know, trying to load a 17? And these are people who have taken multiple classes, but I'm like, just under stress, and even with domestic weapons, you don't process this brain power to think beyond that 1 or 2 steps of like grab the gun, go. And we just wanted to show that as a, you know, hey, this is a learning, like you're always going to be learning, right? I want them to always leave the range going, there's always more. Like always be seeking information. But that's just a fun drill we did with just pistols, right? It didn't even have to be foreign weapons. But you know, if you're bored, take one of your friends that has never shot a flux and be like, load that and go. And they're like staring at it like
there is the argument and the element that's being that I want to make sure that I'm making clearly is yeah, no, I think I'm going to let that one go for a minute because I'll kind of come back around to it if I can formulate it correctly.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is an element of taking things seriously that need to be taken seriously. I think we've kind of split this conversation into 2 primary subjects. One of them,
I like how you've dug into it. Like you definitely come at an approach that I wasn't thinking because I wanted it to be serious, and some people don't, and that's okay.
it's there's a time for one and there's a time for the other, and that's really it's an appropriateness thing. And I want like I want people to, what do I want people, if I want to do something serious, I want it to be serious to the extent that people are taking it seriously, but they're not to the point that they're taking the minutia of details that do not have any impact on the greater threat or the greater situation as of utmost importance, right? So like we'll use this, here's an
maturity.
yeah, but here's an Army example. If I'm deployed at a forward observation post and I'm getting yelled at for the length of my sideburns, somebody needs to lose their job. Like, you know what I mean? The Army has this thing where it, like, if we are dealing with this level, if I'm deployed and I'm in a position that is far from the head shed, far from the big tent in the middle, and I'm out in the wilderness for 30 days, and I come back and I get cleaned up, and my sideburns are a half an inch or a quarter of an inch too long or something like that. It's like that is not what you need to be focused on. And you can tell a lot. There's a a story from a deployment that goes like this though. Like it was my second deployment in the Army, and the unit that I was in did not wear all the patches. We didn't wear unit patches overseas. It was usually just name rank Army, and we would walk. We'd be walking at least once a week. Some group would be walking to a chow hall or whatever, and they would get yelled at by some dude who had rank about not wearing his patches. Like,
Yeah.
where's your unit patch? Corporal, where's your unit patch or whatever? And it's like, Sergeant Major, how long, how how long has the war been going on? Do you not know exactly what's going on? Like, if you don't know that the guys who aren't wearing patches are not wearing patches for a reason, then what are you doing here? Why are you on this base? It's like, you don't, that's not, obviously that's not how like a private or a corporal's going to
Yeah.
talk to
Yeah.
a sergeant major, but it's just kind of like, okay, my brother, we're fighting a war, and you're missing the point. You're missing the war because somebody's not wearing a patch, which is not a new thing. It means he's in a unit that doesn't wear patches.
Well, you got to remember where he comes from, and unfortunately, the people who, again, there are great ones, but the majority of people who stay in do get promoted. They truly believe in the, any lax in the standard becomes a lax in something else, right?
But it's not a lax in a standard. He just doesn't know what he's doing.
Well, no, that's from his back to the animal kingdom, right? His normal kingdom is this, and maybe this is his first deployment as Sergeant Major, and now he realized there are other predators in that kingdom,
Yeah.
and he doesn't know what they look like.
Sergeant Major Applesauce is running on autopilot and needs to get sent home so that he can get on freaking something or another. Because it's like, if you can't figure that out, dude, like, it's not complicated. The people on you're on a huge base that there's soft operators on. If they're not running patches, they're in that unit. They're not going to talk to you.
That guy probably justifies his entire existence by how many people he can yell at in one day.
Good for him.
Yeah.
He's probably going to have a heart attack at 56.
Fucking, was he bald?
I don't know. This was 14 years ago.
No.
But my point being said, that's using
isn't it wild how long it's been?
Yeah,
I'm a 09 Iraq guy and a 2012 Afghanistan guy, and it's wild to think it's been that long.
A 2012 Afghanistan guy?
Yeah.
I was an 09 Iraq guy. 10 Afghanistan. 11 Afghanistan. 12 into 13 Afghanistan. Yeah, that was it.
Well, yeah. Must be nice with them 90 days.
112, 115. Get it right. Get it right, buddy.
The Iraq one was supposed to be 15 months, and luckily it got cut to 12. I was like, oh, thank you, Jesus.
That is a long time. Yeah. So as a veteran, what do you take on the like, I have this many deployments, and the only thing that really matters is how many months in country, dude? Because
my best friend's a platoon sergeant over at 275, and he's got like 15 deployments.
Yeah.
And they were like doing the math, and I was like, it's not as long as you think. But when you say it like that,
I know, right? You're like, oh,
like
yeah,
15 deployments, that's wild. And then I was like, wait a second.
Wait a minute.
Let's do some math real quick.
Yeah, it's like, well, this one, okay, hey, you know what? I had a hard one too. This one got extended. We were there for 6 months. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like, don't get me wrong.
Op tempo obviously different, different mission sets. Like it is funny, but I do tell people it is a long fucking time to be in a country for a year.
Yeah, no, it really is.
Like, that's something I kind of, I don't wish upon anybody, right? Like, I was a ground pounder. I'm very proud of being a regular infantry guy. But holy fucking shit, dude. You definitely, there's a reason why. Like, you can't be on edge for that long. You can't be 100% for that long, right? As much as you think you can be, Johnny on the spot 24/7. No, you can't. Like, you, on your best days, sometimes you're a 6 out of 10 because you've done it every fucking day. And you patrol every fucking day. Like, that's why when people make mistakes or they're like, oh, they kind of like shot up this village, I'm like, makes sense.
I can understand it even if I can't justify it. Where we've been living in our current location, we moved about 2 years ago. So if you were going to take an 18-month deployment, that means you've had enough time to get integrated into your location. You have your pattern of life. And I think that might actually be one of the, if you were to scale back a little bit and look at one of the biggest threats of long deployments for people, especially in a modern fighting sense, where you're dealing with insurgencies, guerrillas, and less conventional forms of warfare, is that the longer a person is in country, the longer that they have to establish a pattern of life, and that makes somebody predictable, and then they're easier to kill.
And that's I mean, the envision of the EFP, it literally came out because they just saw everything we had to do. We had to take the same routes, right? You can only switch up routes so much in a country that doesn't have much roads, right? Yeah, you can do false insertions constantly with helos and stuff like that to try to switch up where you're going. But, why do you think, even for you guys, when you guys started hitting houses, the same way for so long, then all of a sudden, right where you would set up your black side and white side, there'd be fucking mines because they knew exactly how you were going to hit the house at that point, right?
Yep. Yep. No, it's true. So we're starting to talk jargon now.
Yeah.
Let's pull back from jargon and start
Community.
No, I actually think this is something that I think you have insight in, because not only are you, and I mean insight. I'm gonna I'm gonna translate a couple things that you and I relate on easily, and then add a third category. It's like, okay, so if you and I, if I'm gonna come and go shoot with you, I know what I'm getting into. On the one hand, I know that you have a certain background. I'm gonna expect certain phrases. Maybe I'm gonna have, if you're teaching something that I'm not as familiar with, or maybe I'm a little bit like, oh, this is a different way of looking at it. Now I have some context by which to ask you some questions. A case in point example was, I took a course. I had the opportunity to take a course from a guy who was formerly in a special missions unit. Great dude. And he was teaching something, and he wanted us to do this one drill. And I did it, and he said I did it all wrong. And I thought I had the best time, I had the best blah blah blah. And he's like, you did it all wrong. And I was like, completely kind of confounded. And I was like, trying to, and then I had but we were able to ask a question. It's like, well, okay, I shot this like I would if I was shooting a USPSA match. And he goes, no, I don't want you to do it that way. This is what I'm looking for. This is where this comes from. And I go, oh, okay, now it makes sense. And then I shot it again. So from one standard, a USPSA standard, I had the best time, the best score. But the standard that he was trying to make us appeal to, or direct at, was not the USPSA standard. It was a completely different one. It was like, it wasn't 3-gun, it was whatever. And it was, so that's where that background came into play. So for you, if I take your courses, if I'm spending time with you, I have a body of context by which to understand, make certain decisions. Some of it is conscious and some of it's subconscious. And one of those, that why I wanted to have you on the show today, is the idea of the community as a whole. You're not looking at, what do I want to get done today? I want to be good at, I want to be, I want to get better at drawing from a holster and transitioning to, or a set of skills, or I need to get better at slinging my breaching shotgun because it keeps getting in the way. Fine, those are all skill sets. But you're looking at, what do you want to see in the greater gun culture, and what do you want to see within your own corner? Because there are different corners that I will never be a part of, and that is a hard thing to come to terms with. But in the greater gun culture is one subject, and then your own subculture. What are things that you would curate amongst people in a community type event environment?
So I guess the easy way to tackle that is, when we first started it, it was, rifle, pistol, right? Why? It's easy. Everybody had one. And then somebody was like, I forgot what they asked me. They asked me something about an ambush. And I was like, oh, this is how you set up, basic ambush. And then they're like, well, why don't we teach that? And I thought about it, and I was like, okay, like, fuck it. Like, we'll teach an ambush class. I'll set up targets here and there. teach people how to set up their L's, have overlapping fields of fire, cross through an objective, get to their LOA, do lace reports, right? Basic,
you and I know. I don't
yeah,
know how many people who are listening to this know.
yeah, yeah. They're like, what did he just say? But it's stuff that we would do, day or night, cold or tired, and I was happy that the community wanted to go to that aspect of, hey, maybe I use a pistol for home, defense, maybe I use a rifle for home defense, but maybe something happens, right? The way the world goes. And I was like, you know what? Okay, I get it. You want a higher level of knowledge than yourself, and how to not only be told how to set this up, but I would we did a team leader class. We did a team leader class for civilians to set up, hey, we're going to give you 3 random people, and you are going to have to do bounding overwatch this objective. At some point, you will get shot at. You will then need to bound your people into cover, set up a local support by fire, toss a smoke grenade to mask, your movement to that, and control your rates of fire and bound through this objective. And we'll have a radio as your pseudo squad leader. And there's only 2 people in this 60-man class, and we filmed it, that were military. And when you talk it out loud and everything, all those people were like, yeah, I got it. It's going to be easy, right? This is all they need to do. Right. And then obviously first time we, shoot a gun in the air to initiate contact. And you know how people get. One guy's just focused on the target. He's just burning through his fucking mags. The other dude is fucking around with his kit because something fell out and he's not even shooting. And he's on the same side as the team leader who's trying to report a tick. So now you only got 2 guns in the fight. And it was just funny that we'd film everything for them and show them back. And they were just like, holy shit. And I'm like, yeah, see, there's different levels to this gun game. And when you start introducing more variables, i.e. people, it gets worse. And this is, the kids who were doing the best at the static drills, but when they had to bound and shoot and maneuver and talk to each other and communicate, they had no idea what to do because obviously they all have different vernacular. They all have different backgrounds. They have no common ground. And they've only learned how to do this on a piece of paper 2 hours prior. But that's where the community wanted to go at one point. And I was very intrigued by that. And I was happy by that. And then it slowly got into they just wanted to dress up like that and not necessarily perform anymore.
Yeah, well.
But then they wanted more intrigued topics, right? Can we add a vehicle? How can we do, a vehicular, a mobile support by fire and set that up? What do we do if we come in contact with one of those? And I was just like, man, you work at Best Buy. What the fuck?
Man, you work at Best Buy. Okay, so let's talk about react to contact, because you've got your support by fire and something like, actually, let's even do something a little bit more rudimentary. We'll just do Ranger handbook stuff. Battle drills 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, right? These
I'm not digging a trench.
You're not going to dig a trench?
You're not going to dig a trench. I'm so happy I missed that part of the Army.
Well, you're also not. You're obviously not going to Ukraine, so
yeah, I'm not trench fighting.
Stories. But so my point there is, there's literature out there. T-Rex Arms is now printing literature, which is, I think, neat. They're now printing manuals that might not be, or that might be more suitable to reading. And
so can I ask, I guess the question, and I'm a known T-Rex hater, so I'm just going to say that out loud. Where is he getting it from? Has he ever had to do it? That's where the legitimacy of cool, you can print something on a piece of paper that somebody else told you and all that, but it's have you ever done this in real life? Have you ever been held to a degree?
We're getting to that point. We certainly are, right? And so we're getting to that point that in the phrase, and that is literature. The distribution of literature is one thing. We are currently in a time, and I want to make sure this is very clear. We are not living in a time right now where we are behind enemy lines, where we have to do everything in secret and we have to smuggle information back and forth to one
Yeah, we're not
another.
running rat lines.
We feel like it oftentimes, and we feel like we're very close to it, particularly in the sense of we have to kind of we have to be careful about our speech. We need to be careful about optics when our training, what if we're going to go do public training, what it looks like. We have to be careful about infiltrators. These are all things that are true within the gun culture, within America as a whole. There's easy examples of people getting in, not in trouble, people facing legal consequences for shit that they've said on the internet, people facing legal consequences for being honeypotted by federal organizations, and people facing consequences for being carried away by the fervor of the moment. And so these are all things that are going on. We do not, but we're not living in a world where if I have what am I? I'm if I have a copy of the Ranger Handbook, oh, he's spreading seditious material. He's planning to do guerrilla warfare. No, it's not the same yet. So
Yeah.
we're in a, right, but so we are in a time where an individual very reasonably could go to T-Rex Arms, buy a manual, read it, come to the conclusion that he wants to do it, doesn't know how, and then goes and takes a class and learns how to do it. Because I can read the Ranger Handbook all day, I'll tell you, the Ranger Handbook does not. The Ranger Handbook tells me how to do Battle Drill 1 Alpha, but it doesn't tell me how to do it well. How to really look at, that's what talking guns looks like. That's what his team leader running his squad looks like. That's a sufficient signal. And so the question then raises, is that market opening up? I know that sounds a little.
No, I think people would love to do like an SUT 2-day course, right? There are courses like that out there, and I think that they have a price gap of entry that take a lot of people out of it. But I do think that we have now gotten to that point where people want to try to put it all together, I guess is the term, right? They've seen that it only gets you so far, right? Like, luckily, airsoft and milsim have gone up. People are trying to do force on force with night vision, because they realize, hey, that's, spent 20 years of the GWAT fighting at night. Like, I just think that people, by and large, don't want to be held accountable by somebody who has had the experience and is like, hey, no, this is how you should do it. I think people stop at what you just said. They get the pamphlet, they read it, and they think that they're good. I do believe, unfortunately, like, if you take 100 people, we're at the 85% read the pamphlet and they're like, I know what I'm doing. I think it comes to the maturity level of the other 15% that go, okay, I read it, I understand it to my knowledge. I would like somebody to watch me and see if I can do it correctly.
Yeah, because this goes back to the bigger picture problem that I'm running into. I don't know if you can change that. I really don't know if you can. On the one hand, you have the Pareto distribution, 20% do 80% of the work.
Yeah.
You have that. On the other hand, you have the Dunning-Kruger effect of they'll hit that plateau and they won't be able, they'll hit that first plateau, which I've referred to as like the plateau of orthodoxy, where it's everything has to be done this way. I'm the best at doing it this way. They're incapable of conceiving anything other than that way. This is where you get people who say low carry only, like low ready only. There's no reason to do high ready or high port, and it's like, okay, cool. You're never gonna make it, dude. You don't have it. You're stuck on the plateau.
Well, I think we've come from professional backgrounds where we've learned that there's always something more to learn, but
Yes,
that
but
we
my point,
never stop. So how do we get that terminology though? How do we get people to embrace the fact that there's always more and you're never good enough?
that's I guess that's the question that I'm asking, Brent, is you made a statement that if we're going to take people who read the book versus people who are continually learning, that continual learning group is going to be very small. It's going to be your 20%, your 15%, whatever. Then the group that plateaus and satisfies themselves at book knowledge, or whatever you want to call it, the kind of conceptual understanding of a thing, they're going to be 80%. Then if we're going to turn this into democratic elements, the 20% are the only ones who get to vote. That's how you might want to look at it in a republic, or you might want to look at it in different political environments. And the problem is that our ethics within our gun culture do not support that. The ethics within the gun culture is that everyone is acceptable. There's no one preventing you from being a part of it, except for certain ideologies, like perhaps being a communist. Like, that's a pretty hard no for a lot of people, right? But
Damn
the
commies.
yeah, damn commies. But the point with that, and the point that I'm trying to illustrate in that, is, are we spending our time being frustrated about the 80% that we could spend better time just pursuing the 20%?
So to me, it's, quality over quantity, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Which one do
And
you prefer? Like, and that's, I think everyone, goes into the like, well, let's just appease that 80%, right? Who are outvoting you. And, maybe this is my hill to die on, but I'd rather take the constant learner. I'd rather take the guy that knows enough to know that he doesn't know everything and he wants to get better, right? Like, I take classes constantly because I want to come up with new ways of teaching, right? Maybe somebody, like, if you had a class, I know your background, and I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm going to go take a class from him because maybe he has a better way of teaching this that allows me to teach someone else a better way of doing it, right? The constant seeking of betterment. If we could just push that into gun culture, where it's okay that, like, oh, your build drill is better than my build drill, right? Like, it doesn't matter. Can we just constantly agree to try to get better at everything?
yes, I think what we're seeing here is, as we've talked about that pendulum moving away from any form of credentialism, we've reached this chaotic other where there is no standard. Because that is the advantage of having a standard, is that you can hold people to them. But if we don't have a standard, if we have abandoned the concept of having a standard, we run our ship aground of, well, anyone can be here and anything goes. Because, yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I can understand if some dork is going to come up to me and be like, my bail drill is 3.5 seconds, but you're like, or whatever the super high speed is of what of a bail drill is. But I also know that you can't rock up a mountain, or you can't plan an op order, or you can't do any of these other things. It's like, okay, dude, like, I don't care. That's
Yeah,
great.
and
No,
that's
it's
why, not to
teach me
beat
how to
up.
do that build drill faster. That's what I want to hear, right? I'm like, okay. But if but if you run into, again, this dork who's like, he's made his entire identity being able to shoot one drill faster than one special operator guy. You're like, yeah, but what am I getting from you other than ego? Like,
So that's,
nothing.
to me, that's how you just described how the majority of people I associate with see Mr. Lucas.
Mm. Well, and I'm going to refer to T-Rex Arms as something bigger than Lucas himself. Yeah, certainly he has gotten himself in trouble, but I'm not really, I'm
Yeah,
intentionally
not
not
to
making.
single out person, but like,
Yeah,
that's what I mean is, it's easier to just, cool, he's giving out pamphlets to teach people how to do stuff. I've had students that say, I got into shooting because of Lucas Bakken on YouTube.
mhm.
And then they've learned, like, oh, maybe he wasn't the person to teach me, but he did get me into shooting. So it's
Yeah,
like, I got to give credit where credit's due. Is he getting people into the gun community? Absolutely.
sure.
Is he getting
And
the right people into it?
sure. Or how do you, like? It's not how. It's it's this continual, where we're at, development in the direction that we're going. It's, you said you used to put on these community courses that you started going in a direction that you didn't like, and you didn't want to do them anymore. And it's like, okay, what is the direction that we would want those things to go? Because you're not the only person who's ever going to put on community events, and maybe you're not going to put them on anymore. It is you're entitled not to do things. It's like, no, you don't owe anybody anything. You don't owe the gun culture that level of investment of your time. In a sense, you've paid your dues.
I
Given
have
the
had students ask, not to cut you off, and I apologize. They're like, well, who's going to teach us now? And
yes,
it resonated me with, like, I was like, what do you mean? They're like, you have a background teaching, and you were willing to teach us outside of the box stuff, right? Like, how many people let 60 dudes do, squad team live fire where I'm bringing like smoke grenades, teaching them how to make flaming rocks and signaling devices, like having comms where I provide them. He's like, this is all we've ever wanted to do. Like, who's going to let us do that? I'm like, well, that's not my problem anymore, right? Like, there's tons of fucking infantrymen that got out that did this their entire fucking life. Like, you maybe, if that's what the community wants, then you need to start throwing that out there on forums and being like, hey, let's get together and start doing fucking squad live fire, right? Let's do a team live fire. Like, let's see what that looks like. But until the majority of people are going out there and doing bounding drills, on private property, because obviously you're not going to do that on a fucking flat range, that you paid to go. I think people are just going to be content with buying fancy stuff and shooting it on a flat range and doing build drills.
Which is the paradox that we're in right now, is that you and I, who have the background and the pedigree, know where, at least have some knowledge of. I'm not going to say neither of us are going to ever say that we're the pinnacle of whatever we are, right? But we have some knowledge of where a certain drill might belong, like learning how to do again, battle drill 1 alpha, react to contact, break contact, attack at whatever, react to near ambush and far ambush. Like, these are things that are pretty straightforward and simple to us now. But it's also, we know the context of where they belong, and we know that what separates a near ambush from a far ambush, and we know how the actions of both are quite different. But we're expecting people who don't even know that there is a difference between a near ambush and a far ambush to be able to articulate to ourselves what kind of classwork they want.
And that's where I think the separation of when people who first got into the community and were like, I don't know why no one's taking me seriously. And it goes, well, because you don't have a background. And to me, I think that'll always be the thing it comes back to, is you have maybe you can conceptualize it, but you have no idea what it's like to have to learn those things when you're cold, hungry, tired, and learn what people do right and what wrong and what to look for, and be held by somebody else to a standard. I think that will always be the biggest difference between people teaching in the civilian world and people who've taught in the military. Is, yes, there's tons of shitty military shooters. Yes, the majority of people in the military can't shoot for shit. Yes, we get that. But they're held to a certain standard if you're an instructor and you try to hold people to that. And it'll always, to me, outweigh the guy that's just shooting on a flat range trying to teach something. Like, because that guy in the military was only trying to learn how to do it because there was going to be somebody on the other end.
Let's try to close off with this last. I think we can fit this in about 15 minutes. And that is, if you were to look at somebody who does not have a military background, what are factors that you're looking for in them that would signal to you that they meet the standard? Because we haven't talked about what the standard is. And we haven't, you know what I mean, that they're above bar. And because the individual that you're talking about, this kind of metaphorical individual who knows how to say the right things, they can articulate the things about the things, they know how to do the stuff, but they're not being treated as seriously as they think they deserve, has a challenge, which is you're not entitled to being taken seriously. Um, just
Yep.
for
So
existing in the gun culture. But what
yep.
are factors that we look at in non-military people?
So the flip side of the coin, people obviously would always be, what are you teaching? Are you just teaching somebody how to run the pistol or the carbine faster with no tactics, none of that, right? And that's something that I think everyone says, right? Like, well, this guy can shoot very fast. Why can't he teach someone else how to shoot fast? And I'm like, well, he can. But again, we both know that tactics dictate everything we do, right? Distance to target describes method of engagement. That is going to let me know how fast I'm going to shoot or how slow I'm going to shoot, right? For a civilian person who, there's tons of civilians that outshoot me every day, but for them to be able to teach, I would think they would have to be a competitive shooter for an extremely long time, because we both know you can just enter enough matches and get enough points to get a title. And yeah, it would have to be time, right? Like a decade. There's not somebody that's like, oh, I started shooting, since 2018, right? Like, and I got pretty decent at it. Like, what have you done and how have you improved your training? And based off that, how can you teach me to improve myself and my training? Do you have a different approach? Do you have a civilian degree in teaching and how the brain works, so you have a better way of me understanding or performing? Like, I
Sure.
think that would have to be the taken into considerations, because for me, mine is always, I want to train to go up against another individual, right? Or individuals. That is why I'm learning more about weapons, right? Like, the whole point of them is for me to be able to defend myself or property, blah, 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 right?
Sure.
So can that individual, can that civilian who has zero background, right, non-mil, non-LEO, can he teach me to do something better? And how did he come about this information?
Okay. Yeah, because it's like we're starting to look at a question that's difficult. Is like, what does it mean to pay dues anymore? We said it earlier. That these people have paid their dues in a sense, and I understand it. I understand it. Like it makes sense from a military standpoint, and I think sometimes that's working against its own terminology. But so it makes sense to pay your dues. Like, okay, this guy was in the military. He did it for 4 years or 5 years or whatever. Okay, so like he at least has done we have common language. We have some common jokes that we can make. I at least understand some of the framework that person might be coming from. But not everyone that I respect was in the military, or not everyone that I that they're the problem that the gun culture in this element is facing is it doesn't seem to have a language on what paying your dues looks like, because like we can even go back to earlier examples like getting free stuff or like that's not how it works. That's kind of what it looks like. But this idea of um I'm getting way too far off topic with that. What
No,
does it what
I
does
like
it mean? What does
I
it
like
mean for
where you're
someone to
going.
what does it mean for someone to pay their dues if they're not in the military? Or let's look at an environment like that we're in now, where there's a strong contingent of the gun culture that has a very good argument why you should not send your children into the into the military. Um,
Well, I think like me and you would both, if we had children, we would deter them from joining what we did.
likely,
Yeah,
yeah,
like, and that's
likely.
common, right? Like, that's not bad, but
Mhm. Go be an officer, go work in this arena, go do blah blah blah
exactly.
blah blah. We'd want children to, but there's also an element within the gun culture that does say, now I'm not talking about like the separatists or whatever you want to call those people, but I'm talking about just like, um, don't you like under certain administrations or in the direction that the army's going, you probably don't want your children in the army. So then how are they going to be involved in the next generation of gun culture? Are they living on their daddy's coattails? My daddy was a CAG operator, so I'm basically one too. No, none of that shit works.
I guess someone can take X amount of training,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but at the end of the day, like it's the same thing, right? Like, can I take firefighting training and not be a firefighter? Yes.
Yeah.
Does that mean I have the ability to go into a said scenario and fight a fire? No, because I've never done it, right? The mental aspect behind that is not there. Maybe the willingness to do it is there, but it's like we both know, like when push comes to shove, you don't really know until you're in that situation. And I think people can do make believe their entire time. Like one of my favorite things that was in a show that Jack Carr put in purposefully was
Mm-hmm.
in the Amazon series that he had, where that CEO of that company was like, stacking on doors and, shooting targets in a make believe environment. And then when, Jack Carr's character came after him, he froze
Mm-hmm.
because he thought he was ready for that life, but he wasn't, because he had never actually had to live that life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
no, that was a good
just a little
depiction.
nod to people who it's like, hey, you could act all you want until you've
Yeah.
had to do it for real life.
Yeah, and I think there's two levels of analysis that happen here, and I think some people will get it and some won't. There's a difference between the person who's existing on the surface level trying to figure out if somebody's legitimate, in the sense of, oh, that person's just acting, and so that they could so that the individual who's making the judgment can have an assessment and an understanding of the cultural situation that they're in. This is making it sound way too complicated. Then there's a difference between that person and the person who looks at the person who's faking. There's one person can tell that someone's a fake and then be like, oh, but that guy's a fake, so I guess I don't need to worry about him. Or, it's unfortunate that he has undue influence here. A second person will know that that person's a fake, be able to make and then start maneuvering around it. That's it. Like, I don't know how to put this in any other way, but I think the dismissal that, if you look at that episode of Jack Carr's novel, and if you look at of the terminal list, the main character was dismissive of the impotence of the target. He wasn't concerned about. He wasn't. It wasn't like a Star Wars Battle of the Fates kind of episode. It was just, no. He just slaughtered him, and it was done. Like, that's it. And so I think what I'm trying to bring up is that I understand the importance of being able to make moral assessments of individuals and character qualities and strengths and weaknesses and so on and so forth. I think that I want to warn that there's so much attention that's given to trying to determine who's legitimate and who's not, that that I wonder how many people are missing times that could be better spent doing things rather than trying to figure out if this guy is who he really says he is.
If they're worth their time, yeah.
Yeah, like, if
But
I'm if I would rather take a class with somebody and make that evaluation than spend 75 hours trying to figure out if he's cool.
yeah, I would like to close with, what would you do? Would you try to sway that 20%, or are you appealing to the 80% that we said earlier? Do I try to merge the 80 and try to bring some of them over to the 20%, or do I just focus on the the collective, and just because I do miss the community classes in the aspect of knowing my community is out there trying to do something, because
Mhm.
it is almost depressing to see, following all these people, and when they message me, I'm like, hey, when's the last time you shot? And they're like, oh, it's been like 8 months. I'm like, what are you doing? And they're like, well, I don't XYZ, right? Everyone has their excuses, but I'm
Mhm.
like, I do remember seeing those guys every month. If I put on a class and they would change around their schedules, whether they had visitation rights with kids, they'd make sure she had them. If they worked on the weekends, they'd take that off. And like, I don't take any of that for granted, that somebody changed their life around just to come be educated. I did take that very seriously. I don't take that lighthearted that somebody would do that. But it's like at this point, I almost lost in the willingness to do it due to the fact that I've done it for so long and watched the people that I thought could be cultivated to the 20%. Everything I tried, whether it was shaming, whether it was like trying to do big brother, trying to do father figure, all these different ways of trying to get them to see like, hey man, if you really want to get better, like you got to do this. What would you do?
Yeah, because it can be it can become very tempting to be very dismissive and being like, well, they're done, leave them behind.
Yeah, and I'm a very retrospective person. Like I'll wait until I'm no longer, angry at whatever situation, come back, look at it from a different view, and then also bring somebody in who's completely biased and has no skin in the game and be like, hey man, did I fuck up? What should I have done?
Well, good. Yeah, well then we'll leave it then this one with the question. If you're going to stick around and put in, let's start a conversation in the comments below from a community standpoint of what we're looking for here. It's like I know that I know that when we look at the big tent that is gun culture, there's going to be a lot of different communities and subgroups, and there's going to be infighting, and people are going to complain about stuff. That's always what's going to happen. However, it was Reaper that was on recently that also posted a thing on kind of finding your tribe, which I know that's loaded language in today's generation. It's a little but I think that we can have common ground as a gun culture as a whole, while we will by necessity have our own little sub communities, our own little locations. And what I want there, and I think what I'm hearing from you is, how do we put our effort and energy into a positive direction in that way? And so one of the things that I think that the gun culture as a whole, and if you could ask people who did things to teach you something, what would you ask them to teach? Because because I've seen this happen so many times that the same people who are complaining about gatekeeping will not even articulate or put in the time to ask somebody to teach them something about anything at all. The veteran is supposed to know not only what to teach, but how to teach it, to who to teach, and then also not be willing to charge for it and all this other kind of stuff. And it's like, no, man, that all takes a lot of time and energy to maintain in a certain meaningful way. So if you're in the gun culture and you want to see something taught that you have not seen it taught yet, whether it's something as simple as breaching or as complex as raiding a building. And I'm not talking just CQB. I'm talking about the whole thing, set how to do a raid on a location. Leave that in the comments below and we'll figure it out. So, well, Brent, it's been great to have this conversation with you. Where do people find you? How do they get involved? How do they razz you for your bad takes on community development? And where do they go to
So
take the
Instagram,
courses?
OneOneBravo LLC, all spelled out, or my personal Instagram, Brent.bb.beyond. Feel free to swing in, send a DM if you're in the Pacific Northwest area. I'm at a Yelm. I have a private class or a private range that we can shoot on if that's what you're into. Again, the 20% community normally comes and takes private classes, while the 80% only waited for, community classes. But I'm not opposed to putting them on. I guess I would need enough outreach that people are willing to learn this stuff in a manner and want to continue and further their education beyond just wanting to post it on IG and look cool,
Well, if you're not looking cool, it never happened. So,
sixth principle of patrolling.
that's right. Alrighty. So, well, Brent, it's been great having you on. Thank you for this conversation again, and we'll talk to you soon. For those who are still listening to the episode, you know that this has been sponsored by Obsidian Arms, as well as if you are catching this at release, we have our hoodies available for pre-order. I keep saying that they'll be faster, but the closer and closer we get them in house, the better they get done. So, That being the case, you can head over to redactedllc.com, and that's where you can check out our store, or you can keep up to date with us at redactedculture.locals.com. Other than that, we'll talk to you guys soon. So go forth and conquer.